This is what Dune 2 was supposed to be. Dune 2 was supposed to be the Oppenheimer of this year's Oscars. Dune was supposed to get these many Oscar nominations, not Emilia Perez. What happened here? Welcome to the first video of a new series of videos in which we are going to talk about all of the major Oscar nominated movies for this year, that means 2025. First, we'll obviously start off with discussing about all the 10 major movies for Best Picture nominations. Then we'll venture into some other major categories like Best Adapted Screenplay or Best Original Screenplay, and also some animated movies. So we have a long road ahead of us, but of course we are going to talk about each and every movie. So you better subscribe the channel because this is going to be fun. So first movie, of course, is going to be Emilia Perez. This is the highest Oscar nominated movie for this year with 13 freaking nominations. And perhaps this year's Oscar nominations is going to be one for the ages. A movie which is nominated in 13 category is the most hated movie amongst the audience. But most importantly, this movie is absolutely hated and bashed by the two major communities to which the movie actually speaks to, or to which the movie actually speaks about. That means the movie aims at talking about the transgender community, and also at the same time it also talks about the Mexican community, the Mexican people, and both of these communities hate the movie. We'll discuss about this as we go deep into the video, but before that I have to talk about this and I have to stress upon this fact that 13 freaking nominations. And I have the list right in front of me, and I can actually support this movie in a couple of categories, but not in all of the categories, and not clearly in some of the categories, which we'll of course talk about later in the video. But yeah, this is the same number of nominations for which Oppenheimer last year was nominated for, and 13 nominations in a single year is also the joint second highest nominations in a single year. And there's also one thing that we have to discuss is that this movie is the lowest rated movie of 2024 on Letterboxd. Yep. And of course, I am also on Letterboxd. I talk about movies on Letterboxd, of course. I don't know why I mentioned that, but yeah, you can also check out the description for the link. But anyways, first we have to talk about the controversy of this movie because that is quite important. And after discussing about that, then we'll discuss about what were my thoughts about this movie and why I didn't really agree with some of the criticism that people have about this movie. For example, a lot of people hate this movie for just the idea. But anyways, first of all, let's start with the controversy. So as I talked earlier, that this movie is aiming to be talking about the transgender community and the Mexican people and the Mexican culture, but both of these communities hate this movie. First, we'll talk about the Mexican culture. And I know I can't say this from my side because I'm not Mexican, and also when it comes to the transgender representation, I can't comment on that as well because I am neither transgender, I don't have a lot of knowledge about it, and I'm also not a Mexican person, so I can't talk about it. So therefore, while I was watching the movie, I didn't have a lot of problems with the critique that people have about these two aspects, but of course we'll talk about that later. But I can definitely comment upon this fact that what the general consensus is about this movie among these two major communities. And I'm sure you'll hear this argument in a lot of videos that this movie talks about Mexican people, but it is made by a French director, an outsider, and he didn't even study the Mexican culture. In a very famous clip that is circulating all over the internet, he has said he knew what he wanted to know. And that has rubbed a lot of people in the wrong way, and I think that would have been possible if the movie would have represented the Mexican culture in a correct interpretation, but that didn't happen. Anyways, the second point that Mexican people are really hating about this movie is that this movie was not shot in Mexico. It doesn't represent their culture in a correct manner. It was shot in France. The movie was not at all shot in Mexico. And the third thing is that this movie doesn't have any Mexican characters. All the leads in this movie are non-Mexican. That also comes with another fact, and that is their accent. And they're actually saying that Zoe Saldana's accent was kind of passable, but what the main actor did, Carla Sofia Gascon, I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, but that actor didn't really do justice wholeheartedly to the accent. And then also there's one very interesting case about Selena Gomez's accent. Now, I can say this with almost certainty that people have bashed her for her accent, but the thing is, her character in the movie is not completely Mexican. She was from USA and she lived in Switzerland. Yes, she was in Mexico for some part of her life because she had a lover there, but she was away from Mexico for a long time. And therefore, I can actually get behind and defend Selena Gomez's character here. Now, these were all the complaints which Mexican people had about this movie, but now let's talk about the transgender community. Now, they're saying, and I kind of actually agree with this, that everyone wants to push transgender community in the forefront nowadays in the movie, you know, for inclusivity and just to give them a sort of recognition. But that recognition have to be done right. According to the transgender individuals, this movie doesn't do that right. And there's a very simple explanation that I found on Letterboxd, and that explanation was this: that there's a scene in this movie where Martinez has transformed into a female, Emilia Perez now, and she is with her kid, and her kid says, "You smell like dad." And biologically, that's not possible because you're changing gender, her hormones are changing, everything is changing. You're not the previous person, you're not the older person. And how can you still smell like her papa? This was not possible, and yet the movie showed it, and therefore it rubbed the transgender people in a wrong way. Also, the thing that rubbed them in a wrong way, that you are changing the body, you are changing the biology of a person, but the thought process, the thinking is still the same. And this has also rubbed people in the wrong way, that you are showing a gangster, a full-on cartel guy is now a woman, and suddenly he has this change of heart. But I kind of disagree with that. Now the thing is, while I was watching the movie, the idea of this movie appealed to me. The idea of this movie was how a person could change, and to represent that and to show that, they use the device of showing the transgender people. Like, you are changing the gender, and at the same time you're also having a change of heart. The basic idea of this movie was how a person could change from his heart, and to show that, they use the device of transgender community. Now, I can actually defend this movie in this aspect as well, because this idea, I pretty much liked it, because it's kind of a new thing. You see, a cartel guy, he has done everything wrong in this life, but he always had an inclination to a different gender, and after doing all the bad things, he finally got to his senses, changed his gender, and that kind of awakened him, that kind of, you know, liberated him, and or she or her, sorry. So that kind of liberated her, and then she kind of ran a non-profit organization. Now the idea is good, and even there are two particular scenes in which I really admired the movie here. The first scene was when Manitas goes through a sex change operation, and when the operation is done, all the agony, all the pain kind of leaves her body through this scene when she is crying. Now this scene could be interpreted in two ways. One, that she is finally in her own body. She has finally abandoned the body which didn't feel like her own. So that was kind of a liberating moment, that okay, now I am in my own body where I belonged. So that's the first thing that you can draw out from that scene. And that second scene is completely opposite, that she's kind of regretting the idea here, that the pain is so excruciating that she is kind of regretting the idea. But anyways, those two scenes actually made me feel okay, this I can appreciate. And also there's also one scene where Carla is with her kid, and this is the same scene in which I talked about earlier, where Carla's son or daughter, someone, he says, "You smell like Papa." But what happened after that was Carla finally crying. Sorry, I said Carla, I meant Emilia Perez. Emilia Perez, this character, she finally cries. She cries. That moment was very pure to me. And there's also another scene in which Emilia Perez talks to Selena Gomez's character, Jessie, and she asks her that, how was your husband? Did you cheat on your husband? Did you love your husband? And that kind of reminded me of the episode of Friends, in which Ross fakes his own funeral, hides in the other room, and then comes back out and to see that who were the people who came to visit him after he's gone, what they talked about. So that kind of gave me that vibe. But we all have that fantasy. What is our legacy that we are leaving behind? We all have that thing, right? And that was again showcased in this movie. So these are the small little things which I appreciated about the movie. But now let's talk about what I didn't appreciate and why I can't see this movie getting nominated for 13 Oscar nominations. The movie definitely has that artsy feeling through its cinematography, through some of its editing, some of the staging, some of the dance numbers as well. But I clearly can't see this movie getting a nomination for music, best original song, best picture, of course, sound, writing also, because this movie tries to do a lot of things but can't even nail a single thing. And the movie definitely shouldn't be nominated for film editing. And tell me, why isn't Dune 2 not nominated for film editing, the best editing? That was a snub. Totally a snub. Cinematography, no. Direction, no. Film editing, no. Best international film, maybe yes. I am yet to watch the other movies, so it's quite early to comment upon. But makeup and hairstyling, yeah, I can vouch for that, because Manitas was actually played by Carla Sofia Gascon herself. So yeah, The makeup was on point there. Okay, now let's talk about the nature of this movie, which is a musical. Now the thing is, some of the songs were good. I mean, they were catchy, but there's not a single song that I remember after watching the movie. But while those scenes were actually going on in the movie, I was kind of enjoying it. I was actually okay with it. Especially one song was quite nicely done, where how they shot the song, that was pretty good. And that song is of course of Zoe Saldana's. That was good. But some of the songs where the characters are talking to each other and they insert a musical number there, and they're talking about a thing and they start to sing and they start to rhyme as well. So it was like you are kind of wasting the time here, because whatever you had to say through that possibly 40-50 second or 1 minute song, you could have easily said it in 2 lines or 3, 4, 5 lines. But it would have been so much convenient if you just had dialogue over there. So there are a lot of songs in which we see that the characters are actually just talking dialogue, but it's kind of a musical. They are delivering dialogues in a rhythm, in a pattern, with some music, with some beats behind it. So it feels a bit catchy because of the beats and all. It's not appealing that much. It kind of looks like you just had to insert it there, so you inserted it there, but that was not needed. So there were some of these instances like these as well. Now let's talk about the final thing of this video that I want to talk about, and that is the movie feels disjointed. Now there is a reason I said that this movie shouldn't be nominated for best screenplay and best editing. The movie feels disjointed. Yeah, I can see there is a lack of flow in this movie. I can understand why they did that. How the story, they wanted to tell the story in a very artsy form, in a very artsy manner. So I can see some of the creative choices that they took, and I can actually say, okay, they tried to do something different. There were some different transitions. I can see that, I can appreciate that, but that doesn't really recall for an Academy Award, because all those things they did, it was just made the movie feel a bit disjointed, especially when the main conflict of the movie is resolved. That means when Manitas has had their sex change operation, that was the first main conflict that has been achieved. And after that, the movie goes and does and try to do a lot of other things. They try to talk about what the Mexican culture is like, then all of the cartel problem that Mexico has to deal with. They all talk about all of these major things and just can't nail down one thing that they want to talk about. Finally, what they do, they make it an interpersonal conflict story about this husband and wife and their redemption and how they all die at the end. All that you planted in this movie boiled down to this small thing, which was not interesting. If they had some huge consequence in some bigger aspect of this movie, that would have been great to see. Now I know they did try to do that, or they did try to allude to the fact that Emilia Perez's character went on to become kind of a symbol, like Batman, like a symbol. But that was not enough to, just make me feel, yeah, I watched a good movie. Overall, I would say the movie was alright. I was interested in the idea of this movie about a sex change operation changes your soul, changes your body, everything, and also how a drug cartel could turn into a good guy. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he committed a lot of murders, a lot of bad things. And I can also say that, okay, I know why people hate this idea, but I was looking that just as a vehicle, and the core idea for me was how people could change. So I was kind of interested in that. So yeah, this movie does a few things good here and there, but majorly it just doesn't deliver a good movie. And the fact that it has got 13 nominations, that is just come on, what can I say? And on the other hand, Dune Part 2 snubbed in a lot of categories, but the biggest snub has to be for the director. Denis Villeneuve not been nominated, and this movie's director is nominated. Come on. Anyways, these were all my thoughts about Emilia Perez. The next movie that we are going to talk about is going to be Conclave. Yeah, Conclave. I absolutely loved Conclave. You can also check out my review that is out on Letterboxd of Conclave, that we are going to talk about Anora, and then yeah, we'll see. Now, there's one thing that I would like for you to do. Please go down in the comment section and please share your review of this movie as well. And you can check out my other videos on my channel as well. And as always, thank you so much for watching.